Margaret Fago here. Welcome to my class, Watercolor Clouds. And today we are going to be introducing a sunset using yellow and orange to start with, and then adding blues, coming in with another layer for the foreground. Should be a whole lot of fun. We're still going to be working wet and wet on this, but we're going to do a sunset color in here. So not just blue, but blue and yellow and red making orange, but it's still going to be done very similar to the clouds one that I did, where we're going to do wet and wet, making some stringy clouds, but we're going to introduce color into this as well. So step number one was to mix colors up. I have mixed up 6 different colors here. I have an orangish yellow here. I have New Gamboge. I have Aurelian. I have quinacridone rose with just a little bit of yellow put into it. I have cobalt blue, and I have ultramarine blue with a little bit of brown in it, so that it's grayed down just slightly. Okay, so once my colors were mixed, and I have these colors mixed about the consistency of cream. The rose is a little bit thinner because we're going to just use it over in this thin area over here. I'd rather have it mixed a little too thick in the pan and thin it when I get it onto the page than to have it too thin and have it just go on really wet and then just spread all over the place. So step number one, I have my paper on a little bit of a slant. I've got a 1-inch board underneath it here to give it a little bit of a slant so that I know which way the water is going to be running on this. Step number one, let's get this thing wet. So the water is running down this page. I don't know if it shows on the camera there or not, but it is running down the page just a little bit so I can see its movement. Oh, and the other thing is that I did draw on here ahead of time. I drew in where the mountains were going to be. I drew in this bicycle guy, and I have a little bit of shoreline. It's a little sort of visible for you up there, but not super. And at this point I don't want to lift it to show you, but as we work, it'll all start appearing. Step number one, I'm going to ignore my drawing entirely, and I'm just going to be thinking about where this blue is, where the white is, where the yellow is, and all of this light color I'm going to bring all the way into that lower part of the painting. And so all the darks that you see here are going to be totally ignored. They're going to be step number 2 or 3 on this. So I've now got this wet. I'm going to look at it sideways, make sure I haven't missed anything, and it looks like I've got an area right here that's a little drier than the rest of it. And so it's got a nice gentle sheen to it, not a big shiny sheen, but a really gentle sheen. All right, so where do I want to start? Since I'm going to be painting these somewhat separately, I could start with any color I wanted, but I think I'll start with my yellows first. Notice that the sun is probably here, and this is the lightest area. This is the brightest yellow, so this is closer to Aurelian. And as it gets further away, it turns more orangish. Now, the blues, when they come in here, look sort of green. When they come over here, they look a little more gray. And that's because you're going into an orangey color here, and you've got more of a bright yellow here. So let's start with this bright yellow, get that brush damp, go into my yellow. And it's going to be pretty light up there, so I don't necessarily want to have it right in that hole, or I'll thin it down when it gets there. And this yellow is going to come all through that water, and it won't be up in that blue sky, but it is in these clouds just a little bit, so I can put a little thin yellow up into there. Take this yellow in across through here. I can then put more color in on top of here, so I'm going to just start by putting this yellow in. I'm leaving behind some spaces that are going to go a little bit more blue, although they too will. And then I'm going to just let that yellow come all the way down into here, awfully close to my pan here. I wanted to leave it so you guys could see the pan okay, but I want to move it just a hair here. And I'm going to bring this color right on down into my foreground, because even when I put that dark on, I want some of those highlights to have some of this yellow in it. And now the yellow in that water is not it's maybe slightly lighter than what's in the sky. So let's just come in with a damp brush and pull that out. Now let's go into New Gamboge and start in here, right on top of the other yellow that I had. Bring that across, bring this across in through here. I'm going to still come in with a little bit more of that more orangey color as well. And, you know, I'm ignoring all those mountains. I'm ignoring the bicycle rider because they're all going to go in later. And down in here, this is all starting to dry, but it's going to go into more of an orange. So let's just come in with this orangey color. And if this feels too dark, I can lift it a little bit. I can rinse my brush a little, dry it just a little bit, and come in and lift this a little and thin it in the process. And I'm just really pressing my brush down onto the page to do that. Lift up that little extra color. I still want this to stay as damp because I want to keep working this, and if it dries too quickly I won't be able to. I like this orange sort of coming over into this other area. We're going to have some blues that run in across this top here where the water hits the horizon. So I can lift that just a little bit to let that blue be a little stronger when it comes in there. This is starting to look really pretty. Now, we're going to bravely come in with this blue on the sky. This is already starting to dry. I probably could have had even a little bit more water on there. Today is a little warmer day than what it was when I was working last week. And I'm not getting as soft of an intersection here with these other colors as I had. So what I'm going to need to do is rinse my brush just a little bit, dampen it a little bit, and grab the edge of this. Grab the edge of this and just pull it down in and on top of there. Trying to work quick enough. Things are drying a little bit, so it changes how quickly I can work. When it starts drying, you need to sort of speed up your work process just a little. Let's make this a little darker with some of this ultramarine blue up here while it's still wet enough that that'll move in there. And I notice that I'm running all my brush strokes the same direction I want those clouds to work. There's going to be some more blue streaks in here. Let's just see if we can get them to work in here. And be careful about them being too dark. It is definitely starting to dry here a little bit. Let's see, I have a slightly damp cloth here, and I'm going to take that slightly damp cloth and pick up the edges of these and rub this just a little bit to soften that, because it was feeling like it was coming in just a little too harsh. And we want a little more blue sky down in here. I'm wanting to have yellows still remaining. I don't want to have them take over everything. Maybe there's a little blue down in here, but that's also pretty thin. And this damp cloth, let's just bring this and drag it on there just a little bit. And we are about the point where I need to stop. So let's bring that all the way across. I want that blue sky to come all the way across through there. And take this rag and drag it over there. Okay, Margaret, I think you need to stop. What do you think? Maybe we're going to get just a teeny bit of yellow. Let's see if we can get just a little more yellow working in here. I've got to be careful. Damp brush. And then maybe I'm going to need that rag to help. Make sure I don't have it where the blue is. Make sure it's clean. This could be a tissue as well. Okay, I think we need to stop. Oh, you know what I didn't get? I didn't get that feeling of orange over in here. We were supposed to come in with just a little bit more of this more orangey pink color. And mountains, it's going to be in this area right in here. And I'm going to be careful because this might be a little too strong. And rinse my brush, dry it just a little bit, pull just a little bit of that off. Let's go with a little bit bigger brush. That brush was a bit too small. It was nice introducing, and that brush had some blue on it. Too much, isn't it? Now I'm going to come back in with my brush and lift that back off mostly. Back off mostly. And let there be a little bit of peachy down in here. I could have also waited and done a peachy wash over this after it dried. It would have perhaps been a safer thing to do. I'm now getting a fair amount of brush stroke look in here. Let's just take this rag to it again. That really helped a lot in the other areas. It lightens it a little bit because it lifts some off and smooths some of that paint out that I wasn't getting smoothing with my brush. Okay, now we will stop. Okay, so on this painting, I got it as far as getting the sky down, and I had to let it dry entirely before we did anything else. Our next step on the painting will be to put these far mountains in. They are the next darker thing in the process, and so they're going to go in next. I needed to have it totally dry so I'd be able to have a nice crisp edge on the top of them. Also, they have a darker area right in front of them, so I don't have to be really careful about getting that bottom line perfect, but there is a shift in color, a little more yellow here, turning into a little bit more peachy, purpley down that direction. Now, I've already mixed a purple gray, and I want to see whether it's going to be the right color. I've got a couple of sample pieces. I always keep scraps and try colors on them when I'm working. And so I have a sort of a peachy, similar, very close to the color we have down there. And so I want to put some of this across it and see whether that's going to be too dark or if it's going to be just about right. And I'm going to say it's a little too dark, which means I need to thin this pile of paint just a little bit. And I also am wondering if it needs just a tiny bit more blue in it. I'm going to add just a little bit more blue to it and then thin it again. Okay, now let's try this again, see what this looks like. I think that's coming out with a little bit better color. Okay, that's going to be good. Now, this sort of going across like this, it's actually harder to do it side by side, but it's easier to do it straight up and down. So I'm going to turn the painting so that I can paint it. I'm going to go ahead and turn my picture with it so that I can see that as I'm going. Let me just move this over to the side a little bit, and hopefully we can see this as well. I can just barely see my lines in here, but that's okay. Now, as we start at this end, I might end up having to add a little more yellow to this as it goes, because it just feels like, well, we'll see. Maybe there's enough yellow underneath it there. And I'm going to come down and into some of that area that's going to be blue, painting right across where that bicycle is going to be, because he is going to go black. And so I'm just sort of finding some of these edges of the mountains, looking over at my picture a little bit because I can't see my lines in here all that well, but it comes down a little smaller. I'm going to come across through here, and then it comes back up into a little bigger mountain as it comes over to here. I'm totally ignoring the fishermen. We're just not going to have them as part of this. Okay, that's as far as I can get on that part of it, but I can now move down in and start doing some of the darker down below. And that darker down below has a green tinge to it, so let's add a little bit of the yellow into my blue over here. And then I need to get this darker. So how am I going to get it darker? I'm going to add the opposite color to it. So let's take some of my red. I'm going to add some of this red into here. It still feels like it needs a little more yellow in the mixture. And I think that'll work for getting my first layer of darkness down into here. We'll do 2 layers so that it's easier to identify where it's going to be. So this is going to come in. I'm not going to do the bicycle, but I'm doing the area beside it. And we're doing mostly a silhouette here. This is really green down in here, but as the rocks get built up, they're going to they're going to end up being. So I'm working on dry, and as you can see, when I work on dry, my brush marks show a lot easier. I've got to work a little quicker because it's already starting to dry on me, but in some ways I don't mind because there's some little ins and outs there, but I don't want it a straight line through there. So let's break that up just a little bit with my brush marks. Maybe take that right up to that. Now there's some rocks up above. Actually, they're big chunks of cement. This is a man-made breakwater. Getting this first layer of dark on here, and maybe there's a few little light spots that are going to pop through there. Okay, now this has got to totally dry before I do the next part of it up there. I think at this point we're going to need to, let's see, I can do some of those rocks. They are going to be a little more of this purpley color. Let's get some ultramarine blue added to my red. Then I want to gray that down. I'm going to put the opposite color into that purple. It'll gray it down. And maybe that should lean a little more toward the blue. Let's add some blue in there. And it feels like it still needs a little more red. Keep it on the purple side. Purpley gray. So these rocks, I think I mostly want shapes here. I'm not going to try and do too much with getting the exact pieces. There's some light and dark that runs in there, but I'm not sure if I care about that. Maybe I will once I get going with it because I want to break it up into some smaller pieces. And then some of this dark, let's just take it into a dry brush onto my damp area here. Make this some more pieces. Maybe something that comes up. And we're not going to put those fishermen in there, so I'm not going to worry about them. There are some spots here that are maybe a little bit more yellowish. And then let's dry brush a little more in through here. Get some more of that feeling of green into that. Let's add some more blue, some more of that yellow. And maybe up in here, there's some little feeling of grass. If I set my brush down and lift it upward, I can get little grass marks. Don't want to get too aggressive with them because they're going to look strange if I do. Let's break those up just a little bit. So we're wanting to leave some light behind because in this front area you can see into it some. Lift a little piece of shape out of here, just a little bit to break that space up some. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I have to have this totally dry before I can do anything else. Now, if I had a very steady hand, I could take my brush and paint right along this horizon, carefully running my brush along here, but I don't have that steady of a hand any longer, and I've found other ways of doing this. So now that I'm absolutely dry, and we have to be totally dry before we do this because otherwise the tape will not stick properly, and maybe it'll stick to the paint and pick it up, but more importantly, the paint might get underneath of it. Now I have put a mark here at the beginning and here at the end, and so I'm going to set this tape just a little above here and slowly drop it in so I can get it right on that spot without having to do it twice. And then I want to be sure and have it pressed down very tight on that edge that's going to be my horizon. If I don't, the paint might come in underneath of there, and I really don't want that to happen because I want that to be a nice, smooth, straight line. Okay, and this is one of the things that in a when you've got a ocean scene or a bay scene like this, having a straight horizon is actually quite important. If you don't, it just doesn't look right because our eye wants to know that that water is flat, that horizon is flat. And I can't use, let's not use this big of a brush. I'll go down into my next smaller brush. I've added a little bit more ultramarine blue to my purple mixture here, and that is now going to become this water line. Now some of what I have here in my, and I need to move my little holder here. There we go. Now I've got a steady one. I gotta have that nice and steady before I work. So I'm going to start at this end. It's a little wider down in here. There's actually some double streaks to it down in here. But it starts here. So I can just paint right up and over that tape. That'll be just fine. So much easier to, and it's okay if I don't have to cover all of that gray that I put down because I want some of that to stay gray on the outside of it. It looks like it's got a grayer edge to it. It's darkest right next to that line. And then it fattens out down in here. Quite a bit of yellow underneath here, and so it's going to make this look a little bit green, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. Goes a little wider down in here, so let's just make this a little wider here. And then there's a little bit of a break, and I'm not sure if I can do this, but we'll see. Carefully, carefully, carefully. I have my side of my hand resting on my painting, and that's another reason to have the painting dry, and it's hard to get in there close, but this is going to make it feel like there's a little breeze on there. And let me just ease that end of it out. Okay, I think I'm going to go just a tiny bit darker here. And I'm hoping that hasn't gone up and under my tape. All right, so I should be able to take this off even though it's wet. And pull the tape away from it. And it did splash through in a few places. I'm going to have to come back and do a little lifting on that, but it has to dry entirely before we do. I didn't manage to get that tape down completely tight. Shame, shame, shame. Okay, now the last thing that we are going to be doing on this is our Bicyclist, and that's going to need a small brush, and it's going to need black paint. So we started to mix this nice gray, and to make black paint I have to make thick paint. The thinner it is, the grayer it is. The thicker it is, the closer to black. And so I'm going to mix purple, ultramarine blue, and quinacridone rose. And then we're going to add yellow to that. It needs a little more blue in there to balance it. A little more of the yellow. Sometimes when I want to hurry this up, I will use burnt sienna for my yellow. Burnt sienna is brown. It already has some of the colors in it. It'll help get us into black a little faster. I'm going to add a little more blue to this mixture. And then I think we've got this close. So let's see if we really have a black. Ah, yes, it is. Okay, and do I have a small enough brush here? I have a smaller brush if I need it. I think I can do his body okay with this brush. I might have to go smaller for the rest of it. So he's just a silhouette. So what does his face do? And his shoulder comes out, his hand comes out here and is sort of sitting off to the side. His body, he's hunched up there, and then it comes down and his butt sort of sits right there, and then he's going to come down a leg that is pretty much straight. There we go. Now he has a little bit, his sweatshirt is hanging a little loose, or he's got a little gut, one or the other. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt and make him slightly skinnier, and then his other leg comes out here on an angle. And I think I'm going to need a smaller brush to do anything else, so let's rinse that brush out, get my smaller brush. Since this is all silhouette, I think I can just keep on painting. If it wasn't, I'd probably want to do this separately. So his arms rest on a little piece right here, and right in front of his knee is where the tube of the bicycle comes down. There's another tube that runs through here, another piece that runs right out of through here and into this front wheel. I think I drew that front wheel a little too far away from him, so let's see if I can correct that now. Easier to do circles in 2 halves. If you've ever taken calligraphy, they'll tell you that. And then the second wheel, it has to come to the same height. And there's a piece that runs, see, he's got a seat that he's not sitting on. And then a piece of the bicycle that comes down almost parallel to this, but out at a little bit bigger angle to there. And then across, there's a pedal here, and that runs through there. And then we have bicycle. There we go. Needs to go maybe just a little bit darker in. So I'm going to put a little more thicker paint back in on top of here to darken that up, because that got too thin. And then he should have some rocks, some grass that is equally dark down here, so it feels like he's settled into it. Maybe some more pieces across there. Some more bits and pieces. Let's let this sort of just calligraphy out to be some of the shadows in that grass area. Maybe we've got some ships on the horizon out here. What do you guys think? Or are those just a little too big? So let me see whether I can lift out here. Let's see, is this dry? Yeah, okay, it's dry. Now I want to have something here to remind me what is straight. Doesn't have to be right at that point, but it needs to remind me. Okay. Go back and forth on here, and it's going to lift that mountain back there just a little bit. Take that top off of that. Take the top off of this. Now I've got to spread it up into this mountain a little bit, or else it's going to look like I did a lift there. So I've got to ease this into that mountain. And maybe just a tiny bit of that blue. Whoops, not that much. I'm going to just work a tiny bit of that blue back into it. Okay. Let's just take this one off. Now, if there were some ships anchored out there, maybe they would stick up that much. Okay, let's see if I won. I think we can do it. I think it's going to stay just like that. Okay, so the last thing is to put the signature on here, and then this painting is done. And it looks like my signature, if I use that black, will just stand out nicely here. I want it far enough away from the edges that when I go to frame it, it's not going to be in underneath